Okay, everybody. So this is Andrew back here with the Radical Moderate. Um, so there's a Supreme Court. There's a case headed to the Supreme Court right now, and it's concerning me quite a bit. And I wanted to talk about it. I'm a person who's against gerrymandering. I'm against too much power in the hands of certain politicians. um, But hold on just a minute. Step outside and turn the camera and turn these lights on. I don't have very good. But anyway, so I'm going to read this article from the Associated Press, and it's So the headline of this article says, "Supreme Court to hear case on state authority over elections." Now, in the description, I have put a link to this article so that you can either read it along with me or read it later on at your convenience or something. So anyway, I'm going to start reading here if I can get the laptop to behave. It's kind of, I probably need to get some things done to it, clean some things off, like make sure the system's healthy. It's not an Apple, it's a Windows security systems. But anyways, according to this, it says the U.S. Supreme Court on Thursday agreed to hear a case that could dramatically change the way elections for Congress and the presidency are conducted by handing more power to state legislatures and blocking state courts from reviewing challenges to the procedures and results. That right there already concerns me quite a bit. I do believe in a certain amount of power in the state legislature's hands, but over the years, there has become more of a shifting or balance of power with the courts, legislatures, and stuff like that. It continues on. The justices will consider whether state courts, when finding violations of their state constitutions, can order changes to federal elections and the once-a-decade redrawing of congressional districts. The case probably will be argued in the fall. This case could profoundly alter the balance of power in states and prevent state courts and agencies from providing protections for people's rights to vote, said Rick Hansen, a law professor at the University of California, Irvine. There's a wide range of ways the court could rule on this. Taken to its extreme, it would be a radical reworking of our system of running elections. Scrolling down. In the most extreme example, lawyers said if the Supreme Court were to rule that no entity besides state legislatures can set rules regarding federal elections, that could stop a governor from vetoing election bills or a state court from blocking rules that set up different voting hours in urban and rural precincts. Jason Torchinsky, a Republican lawyer who wrote a legal brief urging the High Court to take the case, said it is absurd to think the Supreme Court would ultimately allow that. He noted that it is as recently as 2015, the court argued that legislatures do not have absolute power in elections, ruling that Arizona's voter-approved redistricting commission could legally take the authority away from lawmakers to draw district lines, which is something I'm in favor of. It takes the power out of the politicians' hands and puts it in the hands of people like you and me to redraw our state legislature lines, whether it's state house, state senate, and congressional districts. That, to me, is very important. Many functioning democracies that have districts do that, like Canada, Australia, Britain, I believe Germany, I believe Japan. So, anyways, no, I say Japan. I don't know 100%. I'm pretty sure they do. But it goes on. I don't think you can take the theory as far as the legislatures alone can do whatever they want, Torchinsky said. The problem is we have these rogue state courts. So he's complaining about the state courts, not really about like redistricting commissions that are passed through referendums in states that actually allow referendums, like Arizona. The case, an appeal from North Carolina Republicans, challenges a state court ruling throwing out the congressional districts drawn by the General Assembly that seemingly would have made GOP candidates likely victors in 10 of the state's 14 congressional districts, meaning Democrats would only win 4 out of 14 districts. When the state is roughly half and half, it's half Democratic, half Republican. Trump barely won it by maybe a point back in 2020. So it's pretty close to half and half. I mean, Biden won election by 51% of the vote. Trump had 46% of the vote. And I would still say that America is roughly half and half because Biden had like a 4 or 5% lead on Trump nationwide. I still don't buy that the country is just suddenly we're immediately way more democratic. No, I don't buy that at all. We still can swing back and forth without a doubt. So it's a similar thing in North Carolina. Half the Democrats and half the Republicans, like it's half and half is what I'm trying to say. And the state is overwhelmingly, it was overwhelmingly gerrymandered till the state Supreme Court stepped in and redrew the lines. So to go on down, now this could bite the Republicans in the rear. So I don't know what they're fussing so hard about because currently they have fair lines for the legislature. And if the Democrats are able to win in these elections, which it doesn't look very likely at this point, if it were 2018, I would say yes. But it could end up biting the Republicans in the backside, possibly. I'm not saying it's going to. They might be playing their cards pretty good. They're good at playing their cards. Democrats are usually incompetent on that. But it could bite them in the rear. And if it does, I'm going to think it's really funny. They're going to wish that they kept out of it. But the Supreme Court has never invoked continue on with the article here, has never invoked what is known as the independent state legislature doctrine. But 4 of the court's conservative justices have expressed interest in taking on the subject. One of them, Justice Clarence Thomas, was among 3 justices who advanced it in the Bush v. Gore case that settled the 2000 election. It only takes 4 of 9 justices to agree to hear a case. A majority of 5 is needed for an eventual decision. The issue has arisen repeatedly in cases from North Carolina and Pennsylvania, where Democratic majorities on the state's highest courts have invoked voting protections in their state constitutions to frustrate the plans of Republican-dominated legislatures. Now, I don't know if these are lines and districts that violate these state constitutions or not. I don't know what the constitutions of North Carolina and Pennsylvania say, so I can't say for sure. The Supreme Court that are majority Democratic, usually by 1 vote, are saying that it is violating the Constitution of their states. If it is, those maps need thrown out. If it's technically not, well, then I can kind of understand why people would be upset as to why the Supreme Court of their state is saying this is unconstitutional when there's nothing in the Constitution against it. So I don't know which is true at this point. I'm completely open-minded either way. Either way, though, it is still wrong. Whether it's unconstitutional or not, it is still wrong. And I think maybe these justices are trying to find a way. It's always possible to take something that is morally wrong and try to find something in the law or the Constitution that justifies kicking it out. But I don't know 100%. So let's move on. It says the case comes as state courts have become increasingly involved in redistricting. The consequence of a 2019 decision in which the Supreme Court said federal courts could no longer handle claims of illegal partisan gerrymandering. And with some of these states, they have Republican legislatures but Democratic governors. Because while you can gerrymander yourself into a majority, you cannot have the whole statewide vote goes for one candidate or the other. And if the lines of the districts are gerrymandered to protect one party, well, the executive of that state, like a governor, can still be different. And that happened in Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. They all have Democratic governors. And in Pennsylvania and Michigan, these Democratic governors won by very convincing margins. It was not safe. I mean, it was not safe. It was not tight margins. Like Gretchen Whitmer won by 10 points. Governor Tom Wolf won by like 15 or so points. It was a big margin. Governor Evers of Wisconsin, however, had a lot tighter margin, and a year that was very positive for Democrats in 2018. So, moving on, which I find that them throwing out illegal partisan gerrymandering, I mean, them not being allowed to take up illegal partisan gerrymandering, I find that to be a tragedy. So, to go on, this article says initially in cases in states such as North Carolina and Pennsylvania that hurt Republicans and helped Democrats. But courts in Democratic dominated states, including Maryland and New York, Maryland has a Republican dominated Supreme Court because they've had a Republican governor for going on 8 years now. And Democrats have allowed him to appoint these justices to the Supreme Court because they have an age limit in their Supreme Court. I don't agree with the age limits, but I do believe in term limits. But they have an age limit. So a bunch of justices went during Governor Larry Hogan's tenure, 2 or 8 years as governor. And so he got to appoint conservatives to the Maryland Supreme Court, and Democrats, they allowed it. They controlled the legislature with a firm grip in Maryland, and they were okay with it. So they're on there now. So they're kind of a check on the Democratic legislature. And they threw out a gerrymandered map in Maryland that went in favor of the Democrats. Once again, I'm completely in favor of that. So you had the Democrats gerrymandering like crazy in Maryland. And a conservative Supreme Court, I say conservative, I don't know that saying conservative is really the right thing to say. It's kind of unfair. Like, they're probably conservative justices because Larry Hogan put them on the Supreme Court. But that doesn't mean that their judicial philosophy is going to be necessarily partisan. So I don't know these people. So I'm just going to say they just ruled probably what was right, and they threw out the Democratic gerrymander. And the reason why the Democrats were able to gerrymander is because they have super majorities in both chambers of the legislature, which when Larry Hogan vetoed their gerrymandered maps, boom, they just immediately are able to override his veto because I guess you could say they've gerrymandered themselves into a majority because I'm sure they did. There's no way they didn't. Back 10 years ago, they were very Democratic 10 years ago. But at the same time, they are very Democratic. Like, Maryland is more Democratic than Tennessee is Republican, which is a lot. Tennessee went for Trump in 2020 by like 22 points, which is a big margin. It's a slam dunk. But Biden won Maryland by like 32, 33 points. So nearly a 10, 11 point jump on even what Trump did in Tennessee, overwhelmingly Republican state. So Maryland is probably like third. I'd say around the third most Democratic state in the union. You have Vermont, Massachusetts, Maryland, and then I think finally California. I think that's how it went in 2020. But anyways, so going on. Oh, and New York also gerrymandered like crazy, and they actually have a provision in their state constitution that was passed in a referendum. It was a bipartisan support that bans gerrymandering. It's in their constitution. The legislature is not allowed to gerrymander in New York. And a entirely Democratic controlled Supreme Court in New York, completely. Every justice on that Supreme Court was appointed by a Democratic governor. Every one of them. And I don't know if it's unanimous or not, but regardless, that Democratic Supreme Court of New York completely threw out the gerrymandered maps that the Democrats passed in New York. And it was an ugly gerrymander. I mean, it was ugly. There is no alibi for that. It was ugly. Well, anyway, so that was a case where liberal justices were not exactly ruling in favor of the party that put them on the court. They were ruling based on the state constitution and the law. So kudos to them. And I think if you're a conservative, you probably would be thankful for that, especially if you're in New York. Because New York went like 22 points in favor of Joe Biden. It was roughly as Democratic as Tennessee is Republican. So about 22 points in favor of Joe Biden. That's largely probably because of New York City itself, which has a large population. But anyway, so going on down, I'm rambling so much. I'm sorry here, but I get excited about this. So the High Court already has another significant redistricting case on its to-do list for the fall. A reconsideration of how the Voting Rights Act, which I support, requires majority-minority districts to be drawn to ensure marginalized groups have a chance at electing their preferred representatives. But the North Carolina case has implications far beyond redistricting. The independent state legislative doctrine could also hold that state courts cannot stop legislatures from imposing any restrictions they want on congressional voting or even the selection of electors who choose the President of the United States. Now, that's ridiculous in my opinion, because I believe state courts, when they look at the Constitution, should be allowed to stop laws from coming into effect if it goes against their state constitution. That's what the Supreme Court of the United States does for Congress. If you've noticed, some laws got overthrown. Whether you think these laws were unconstitutional or not, that's not what I'm debating. My position is the Supreme Court overthrew some gun regulation cases from New York because the majority on the Supreme Court saw it as unconstitutional. Whether you see it that way or not, that's the way they saw it, and they're the ones who matter. Now, this is a gun rights case, and comparing that to a voting rights case is like comparing apples to steak. But so it's not totally comparable here. But my point is they have the right to strike down laws if it is argued to be unconstitutional or something. And that's what state courts do with state laws. But there is a weird part in the Constitution, apparently, that says that, state legislatures have a lot of authority and blah, blah, blah. So let's go on with our reading. But the North Carolina case has implications far beyond redistricting. The independent state legislative doctrine could also hold that state courts cannot stop legislatures from imposing any restrictions they want on congressional voting or even the selection of electors who choose the President of the United States. North Carolina House Speaker Tim Moore, who filed the appeal to the High Court, cheered the news that the case will be heard. This case is not only critical to election integrity in North Carolina, but has implications for the security of elections nationwide. Moore, a Republican, said in a statement. Now, mind you, let me just point out here just for a momentito. If you do this and say that state legislatures have the total authority on redistricting and stuff, it sounds kind of bad-ish, a little bit, for Democrats, kind of. But then what you have to look at is New York, in Illinois, and all of a sudden you have Washington and California, which has so many people in it, will suddenly be allowed to gerrymander like crazy. Now, and when you have states like um, Texas, that's kind of starting to move towards the center now. I'm sure the Texans could really do a number on Democrats if they wanted to. But so far, they've chosen not to. They've chosen to protect their incumbents rather than just gerrymander other districts out of existence. But California and New York and Illinois and some of those states might not be so willing to give the Republicans a break at all. And they might gerrymander their states completely Democratic. So if you're a Republican, you might not like that. That might go against what you like. And the Republican Party needs to be careful. Now, the Republican Party is trying to be shrewd, and maybe they can. What I think we need is a third party to bust these things out of the way anyway. So just scrap them. But anyway, I'm going to scroll down a little more. It doesn't look like there's just a whole lot left in this segment. Voting rights groups were furious. Quote, in a radical power grab, self-serving politicians want to defy our state's highest court and impose illegal voting districts upon the people of North Carolina, said Bob Phillips of Common Cause North Carolina, which is a organization I like, and I've supported them in the past. Common Cause is an excellent nonpartisan nonprofit organization to promote good health, democracy. They've been around for years. I don't know what all they've accomplished during their time, but I think we need them. To continue, it says, which brought the lawsuit that overturned the GOP drawn maps. So, Common Cause got the GOP drawn maps that were gerrymandered overturned. We will continue to stand up for the people of our state and nation as this case goes to the United States Supreme Court. We must stop this dangerous attack on our freedom to vote. And that's the Associated Press's writer, Gary Robertson in Raleigh, North Carolina. He contributed to this report. So, yeah, that's happening. And it really kind of has me concerned. I don't know yet just how far the Supreme Court's willing to go. I was listening to the BBC, their BBC News World Service on my phone. I've got it on the NPR app, which I love. But they were talking about, they had like several different legal experts on there. There's like one from the left, there's one from the right. I'm hoping the conservative legal expert was correct, because he seems to think that they're not going to go as far as what the left is thinking that they're going to go, which I hope that he's absolutely right. But I'm not totally concerned. I'm not totally convinced about it. Now, then you have a nonpartisan one, kind of someone who's not really either one. And he actually leaned towards the liberal being possibly correct. But he's trying to keep the faith that the conservative is more correct. That they're not going to throw out as much authority to the Supreme Courts or state courts as what we're afraid of. I'm a little anxious about it. I'm trying to think about it too much, trying to be positive, just try to get the word out to people. But anyway, I've been going on for over 24 minutes, almost 25 minutes. So I'm going to sign off of here. I might come back before the weekend is over. But anyway, so if you will, please keep open ears and an open mind. Always be on the lookout to learn more and to try to work with others and help others understand your position and learn what their position is. And I also recommend putting the Associated Press on your phone. The Associated Press is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, very immaculate news organization. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They're not often in the news for major flubs. And I don't think they have a big fight to be first all the time, because a lot of times they are. And a reason for that would probably be because they're a wire service. They're all over the world, and they're probably some of the ones that send information to the big broadcasters in America and around the world that, hey, something's going on in Africa, or something's going on in Asia, or there's this going over somewhere in the United States, just because they have reporters stationed all over the world. And since they're not broadcast journalism, it's probably a little bit cheaper on them to be reporting, because they write instead of do an actual video and a live broadcast and stuff. But anyway, so that's all for now. It's been more than 26 minutes I've been talking. So have a good weekend. I might see y'all tomorrow or Sunday, probably Sunday if I do another one. But anyway, I wanted to talk about it and get the word out. I hope you watch it to the end. It would make me happy if you do. So anyway, y'all have a good night.